A female patient at the clinic recklessly jumped into the pool to get the attention of her doctor, Dr. Pierre. The patient, named Brigitte, hoped her dramatic act would make Pierre agree to marry her. However, the doctor remained unimpressed, and instead thought Brigitte needed more treatment. Meanwhile, Pierre was off duty because he had to undergo a heart examination by his wife, Dr. Gabby. Elsewhere at a fair, Odil was enjoying watching exotic dancers entertain the audience. The show's owner, Jean, assumed Odil was interested in joining, but she politely declined and explained that she was a tennis player. Jean remained convinced that Odil must have some interest and offered her a role in his show. Although intrigued, Odil hadn't given a definite answer. Jean gave her until the end of the week to decide. On the other hand, Gabby discovered that Pierre had a heart condition. She warned her husband to avoid strenuous activities to prevent a potentially fatal heart attack. Pierre just laughed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal, while admitting that his prime years were behind him. During a therapy session with Brigitte, Pierre started to feel uncomfortable with her presence, especially when she dried herself off after swimming. In a soft tone, Brigitte said she had jumped into the pool because Pierre had once promised to marry her if she disobeyed him. Pierre denied ever saying that, but Brigitte eagerly kept talking about their wedding plans. Annoyed by the situation, Pierre tried to steer the conversation toward Brigitte's treatment. Brigitte casually replied that she took her medication daily, which only made Pierre lose interest even more. He decided to end the session early. Shortly after, Pierre called his ex-wife to return a painting. The next day on a train, Pierre met Odil. He was immediately captivated by her beauty. However, he didn't realize that Odil was dreaming about him and her ex-boyfriend. When she woke up, Odil calmly asked Pierre to let her know when they reached her stop. After helping Odil with directions, Pierre continued his journey and met Chantal, his ex-wife. During their conversation, he downplayed his health issues. At the beach, Pierre saw Odil again. However, after parting ways with Chantal and returning to the train, he lost track of Odil, leaving him disappointed. Back home, Pierre once again listened to Brigitte's endless ramblings. This time, though, he started feeling frustrated with all her unrealistic fantasies. Upset at being ignored, Brigitte threw her drink at Pierre. Instantly, Pierre felt tightness in his chest, a sign that his heart condition was getting worse. The next day, while cycling, Pierre accidentally crashed into a tennis court. However, his worries quickly faded when he saw Odil practicing with great enthusiasm. After practice, Pierre tried to talk to her, but Odil ignored him and went straight to her car. Instead of giving up, Pierre followed her, pretending to be lost. Odil was in a hurry to leave, but Pierre stood in front of her car, blocking her way. With confidence, Pierre pleaded with Odil to admit her attraction to him. However, Odil assumed Pierre was only interested in a fleeting romance, and suggested he find someone his own age. Pierre tried to explain that he genuinely wanted to get to know her better, even offering to watch her practice and pay for it. Hearing this, Odil smiled but still declined, saying she was busy preparing for an exam. Pierre kept urging her to take a break from studying and have dinner with him. But when the agreed day arrived, Odil skipped their date and went to the fair instead. Determined, Pierre searched for her and finally found her in the crowd. He worried that she wouldn't recognize him because of his new beard, but to his surprise, Odil complimented his new look, boosting his confidence. Among the crowd, Jean spotted them and tried to convince Odil to let Pierre buy a ticket to the burlesque show. Jean promised it would be a life-changing experience. Pierre was hesitant, but Odil insisted he should go. Inside the tent, Odil was mesmerized by the dancers and began imagining herself performing on stage. Meanwhile, Pierre started feeling uneasy about his health. After the show, Odil took him back to the clinic. However, Pierre was disappointed that she didn't seem too impressed with the night. When he tried to get closer to her, Odil rejected him and pushed him out of the car. Sometime later, Odil experienced dizziness and a nosebleed, making her worried about her health. The next morning, after consulting a doctor, she dreamed of Pierre watching her. Jean then asked about her relationship with Pierre, but Odil lied, saying he was her uncle. Even so, Jean still questioned the man's behavior. He simply told Odil to focus on her work. Jean told Odil that if she joined the dance troupe, they would go to Angouleme to keep her identity hidden. At the fair, Odil overheard the women saying they often worked in Paris after the performance season ended. Curious, she asked if men ever tried to take advantage of them, and Siska confirmed it. However, Wagon always made sure everything went according to what the audience wanted. Odil then expressed her desire to make the audience go crazy for her. Shortly after, Pierre called to apologize for his previous behavior. Feeling flattered, Odil started thinking that this old man was trying to make a move on her. She invited him to Angouleme on Sunday, using the excuse of visiting her aunt. Pierre agreed. When the day arrived, Pierre enjoyed the journey with Jean, who eventually dropped him off at a restaurant in Angouleme and told him to wait. Meanwhile, Jean took Odile to the fair run by Hugo. Unfortunately, Hugo was unimpressed with Odil's athletic abilities. When asked to perform something, Odile admitted she hadn't prepared a routine. She asked for permission to undress as part of her act, but Hugo insisted she dance instead. Afterward, Odile treated her nosebleed and started feeling anxious about her future. Jean tried to reassure her, saying he was carefully considering her future. Odile then asked why Hugo called her his girlfriend. Jean explained that Hugo needed a lover to bring some color into his life. During dinner, Pierre approached Odile, who looked troubled. Pierre asked about her aunt, but Odile was reluctant to answer and instead expressed her concern that he was enjoying the trip too much. Pierre admitted that he was, but he was also frustrated by all the lies he had heard. He wished Odile would be more honest, especially about what was really going on among the dancers. Pierre felt completely humiliated. He had traveled a long way, stayed in a modest restaurant, only to be outright rejected by someone he had hoped would show him a little affection. Meanwhile, Jean was convinced that Odile wasn't interested in Pierre simply because of his older age. On the other hand, Odile was exhausted. She just wanted to leave as soon as possible, asking for directions to the train station, hoping to escape the situation as quickly as she could. However, Pierre's bad luck didn't seem to end. In Angouleme, he faced a series of unfortunate events, getting a terrible motel room, being forced to relieve himself outside, and worst of all, being chased by a stray dog. At dawn, Odile suddenly appeared in his room, but instead of feeling happy, Pierre felt disgusted by how she was treating him, as if his presence was nothing more than a temporary escape. Half-conscious, Pierre started rambling about his vision of a beautiful woman. Then suddenly, he made a big decision, to leave his career for Odile. He even considered jobs he had never thought about before, like becoming a butcher or a clown. At that moment, Pierre mentioned that Jean was thinking about proposing to Odile, but Pierre wasn't ready to give up just yet. He urged Odile not to walk away from her feelings. Then honestly, Pierre admitted something he had felt since the night before. He wanted her. After his confession, he felt thirsty and said that Odile was the last woman in his life. His words moved her. But right after that, Odile suddenly had another nosebleed. When morning came, Jean arrived and told her to get ready for her debut. That's when Pierre found out that she was going to perform in a show. In the tent, Pierre watched Odile and felt satisfied with her appearance. He even insisted that she keep her clothes on. While they waited, Pierre overheard news about a dancer who had quit due to mistreatment. Hugo then encouraged Odile to go on with the performance. When she finally stepped onto the stage, Odile felt nauseous, but she pushed through. She began taking off her clothes, trying to win the audience's applause and approval. But in the middle of the cheering crowd, her body suddenly collapsed. Seeing this, Pierre panicked. He tried to push through the crowd, desperate to check on her. But when he finally reached her, he just froze. Blood was streaming from Odile's nose. She was lifeless. Jean took Odile home. Together they mourned as they read the letter she had left behind. In the letter, she explained that she had been experiencing frequent bleeding and had actually planned to return to the hospital for surgery. But fate had other plans. Back in the city, Pierre woke up alone in the car. He didn't know where to go, so he decided to walk home. As he walked, he reflected on the journey he had shared with Odile. He accepted that life was full of uncertainties, and maybe, for the first time, he truly surrendered to whatever would happen next.